This is a story about Jonah, but not the story about Jonah you probably know if you're familiar with anything about Jonah. If you know the story of Jonah, you probably think of the story where God sends Jonah to Nineveh to tell those people to turn from their evil ways, but instead Jonah is like, nah, and goes out on his ship, gets swallowed by a whale, stays there for 3 days and 3 nights, and is like, fine, God, I'll go. We pick up after he goes to Nineveh, tells the people to turn away from their evil ways, and they do. And the whole city is saved and God doesn't destroy them. But when we meet Jonah, Jonah is angry. He is sitting outside of the city and he's kind of pouting. See, he didn't like the Ninevites in the first place. He's kind of mad to see them saved so easily. So God asks Jonah something that he asks a couple times in this story. Is it right for you to be angry? To which Jonah responds by continuing to sulk. So overnight, God sends a tree that grows up and protects Jonah from the sun. And Jonah is happy. But then, God sends a worm overnight that destroys the plant, and Jonah gets really hot and uncomfortable and grows really angry about his whole situation again. And God says, Jonah, is it really right for you to be angry? And Jonah is like, yeah, God, I'm really, really, really angry. And we see that God is paying close attention to Jonah's internal life. And that's a big part of what the theme for this verse wants us to pay attention to. But God shows Jonah that there are hundreds of thousands of people in this land, and God cares about their individual experience just like God cares for Jonah. He says to Jonah, you've been concerned about this plant, though you didn't even tend to it. It sprang up overnight and then died overnight. So imagine the magnitude of my care for these many, many people. Oh, and he makes a point to mention the people's cows, which I like too, because, hey, all of creation matters. But yeah, in this story, we learn the importance of being heard. And we get this kind of petty story about Jonah, but see, it's still prioritized by God, while God also cares for the lives of all of the Ninevites. And their cows. Don't forget the cows.
I think Jonah was mad at God, at least as I read it, because the Ninevites were people he did not like. He thought of the Ninevites as his enemy. They were these people who did everything in the way you weren't supposed to, and he thought that they were the last people who should ever be He thought they were the last people who should ever be given grace from God, and yet he watched them as God blessed them, and he got really upset about it, and he just couldn't understand why these people who he thought didn't deserve the love of God were getting it. And they weren't just getting it in any circumstance, they were getting it right as he watched. And so he got really upset about it. That's how I think about it.
I think that Jonah had a sense that the world was unfair if the people that he thought were bad didn't get punished. And so there's this kind of 1-to-1 ratio for Jonah that the people he didn't like, that he considered bad, didn't get punished. And so he was mad at God for that.
Oh, yeah. I've definitely been mad when others have succeeded, especially because it feels like it's a reflection of me, and that's not necessarily the case.
Yes. Yeah. Which is frustrating to really want something and then watch somebody else get it can be, frustrating.
I think I was super competitive I think I was taught to be super competitive in a lot of my extracurriculars. And so I'd get super mad when I felt like my worth was tied up in how I performed in whatever I was doing. And I don't know, I think that it's okay to be like, yeah, I'm mad. But sometimes it's good to unpack why, what's actually motivating that.
Something that was actually kind of unsettling at first, but it does make me feel heard. Troy has a tendency to just be very quiet when other people are talking, and he doesn't immediately jump in the second they finish their last word. He leaves space after people talk in case they're gonna say more things, and I think that's cool. And that it's weird to me because that doesn't happen with other people usually, or at home people talk over each other all the time, but it's nice to feel like he's listening.
Some of the best things that people can do to make you feel heard and understood is to listen and to hear what's happening, especially because you'll learn that if you listen to folks, you'll find that you may have similar experiences that you wouldn't have otherwise known about.
I think that I feel most heard and most seen and most understood when I talk about something that's bothering me, or tell someone the reasons I'm frustrated, and then later on they find a way to check in. And I find that really comforting and supportive, and I have lots of good friends that do that for me.
Expressing my needs and having them met in a multitude of ways, whether that's through needing a safe place and ending up here, or simply being like, I need rest right now, and getting that, or I need to be listened to right now, and getting that. Yeah.
There definitely have been times when I've had emotions and experiences that are difficult to understand and process. And I would say that I often attempt to not think about them. And that's really difficult because these emotions and events, they need to be thought through and experienced, and not sent to a corner of your mind where they're not going to be accessed.
Yes. I think that grief is the thing that comes forward the most. I think that grief and anger are really close together to me, and not knowing how to process them and them feeling too overwhelming to know what to do with. And yeah, I think that they make you feel separated from people that you love, and that's the saddest part about grief, and it's really hard.
I have big emotions. I've been told I'm an intense person. I'm an Enneagram 8. Yeah, I think there's definitely fluctuations, because something feels so big, you can feel so bogged down by it. It's kind of just one directly feeds into the other, right? And at least for experiences, I think that there can be an initial one, and then the emotions that often stem from those can fluctuate a lot and change, and it's really hard to see how that adapts over time and how to manage how that changes. No one tells you. You don't get a guide. I wish you did.
I mean, yeah, I like that probably God understands what I'm feeling better than I do. Because I don't always know how to decode everything that my brain is doing or telling me, and it's a little bit comforting to know that I can talk to God about it, and hopefully God's going to have a better idea of what's going on.
It's really important that those experiences that are so difficult to process and comprehend aren't relegated to parts of your head where you won't think about them, where you're trying to ignore them. It's important that you think about them and consider them and sit with them and be comfortable with those challenges, because that's where growth happens.
I think that the thing that's hardest for me to kind of put into the realm with God and to think about is anger, because a lot of times that's something that I feel embarrassed for feeling, or I feel guilty for feeling, and it feels like that's something I should figure out how not to feel, and so I have a hard time figuring out what to do with that and using it in a constructive way, because I spend a lot of time feeling bad about it. So this story ends before we know what Jonah did after God told him why God felt like God should rescue the Ninevites, and I wonder what you think that Jonah should have done after that.
Every time I hear this story, I don't understand why there are cows in it. That's my only question.